Quake, Disaster in San Francisco, 1906, Chapter 5, Part 2. Clutching the squirming dog as tightly as he could, he edged backwards through the tangle. At last, half crawling, half staggering, he emerged from the pocket. When they were under the open sky again, the dog nestled close to Jacob's chest and licked his chin. "Hey, kid!" a voice hollered from the street. "What do you think you're doing? Get off of there before you break your neck." A man scrambled part way up the mound and held out his arms. Jacob handed him the dog. "My family," Jacob said hoarsely. "I'm trying to find them. We live in the building." "Nobody's in this heap. I've been crawling around these buildings all morning looking for folks who might have got trapped. Ain't heard a peep from this one." The man set the dog down near the street and grabbed Jacob's arm to help him scramble off the pile of debris. "But my family, we live here," Jacob tried to explain. "They were still in bed when I left." "Everybody got out of this house before the walls gave way. At least everybody who's able to get out." Jacob studied the man's face. The man met Jacob's eyes. "Look, kid, there ain't no point in breaking your neck trying to dig through all this," the man said. "If your family were trapped in this building, they're goners, and that's the truth of it. If somebody was still alive here, we would have heard 'em screaming by now. Lord knows we've heard plenty of screaming next door where the Nevada was." Jacob hesitated. "Instead of breaking your neck up there, why don't you go ask around the streets? Maybe somebody's seen you folks." Jacob scanned the jumble of boards, railing posts, furniture, and unidentifiable objects that was once their boarding house. He really didn't know where to begin tunneling to uncover their apartment, and it was plain that he couldn't sort through this entire mound by himself. The man's suggestion made sense. Maybe somebody on the street had seen Papa and Sophie. Brushing little nuggets of broken glass off his sleeve, Jacob noticed his wrist was bleeding. But he ignored the trickle of blood and said, "Maybe you know my father? He's pretty tall and thin with dark hair. Itzhak Kaufman's name. He's a butcher. He would have had a little girl with him. My sister Sophie, she's 5, curly hair and big brown eyes." The man shrugged. "Sorry, kid. I don't know the name, and you're describing hundreds of folks down this way." Jacob nodded, stamping his feet to shake off some of the dust. The man ripped a length of fabric off the hem of his shirt and motioned for Jacob to hold out his bleeding arm. "I don't see any shards of glass in here," he said as he tied the fabric around the wound. "Better wash it clean when you got a chance, though." Jacob sniffed. "Do you smell something burning?" he asked. The man frowned. "Fire's coming this way. It's 3, maybe 4 streets over. Fires are starting all over the city, and with the water lines cracked, ain't no way to put 'em out. Don't know what we're going to do." He shook his head. "Even if the city had enough fire engines to go around, how could them wagons get through the mess in the streets? Guess it don't matter down here, though. Who's going to worry about these cheap boarding houses when them big fancy buildings downtown in danger of burning up?" "Hey, Mac!" a voice called from the collapsed Nevada house. "Over here!" yelled the man who was helping Jacob. "Think I got somebody. Can you give me a hand?" Jacob followed Mac, who hurried back to the mountain of debris where the Nevada boarding house once stood. "Better stay back, kid," said Mac. "Don't want you getting hurt again." He disappeared into what looked like a tunnel leading down into the ground. It was dark at the bottom, and Jacob could see water seeping through the boards. After a few moments, Mac and the 3 other men emerged from the hole, balancing the body of a woman on a long board. Jacob helped clear a path for them on the street. A knot of onlookers crowded around the men, pushing in to see the body as the men laid it down. Jacob looked at their faces and understood that these people were searching for their families too. When the rescuers carried out a lifeless body, all the people waiting on the street hurried over, praying the dead person wasn't somebody they knew and loved. Jacob edged into the group. 2 of the rescuers were standing with their heads bowed in prayer. Eyes closed, they held their right hands over their hearts. He heard someone wailing. The dog pushed through Jacob's legs and sat on his foot. Jacob bent down and picked him up. One large man broke away from the group. Mac grabbed the man's arm and said, "Hold on, Callahan. Surely you can spare a minute for a bit of prayer. This is Duncan O'Connor's mum." Jacob gasped. "Timothy's grandmother? That's the woman I met last night. I offered to carry her bundles up the stairs for her." He stared at the body. Mrs. O'Connor looked so different that he barely recognized her. She was as motionless as a fallen tree, but her eyes were wide open. A long nightshirt clung to her white body, and the skin of her bare legs glistened with moisture. Her gray hair was pasted against her head, and her face was puffy. The skin on one side of her forehead was bruised and purple, like something had fallen on her while she was lying in bed. Forcing himself to shut his eyes, Jacob tried to remember the words of the Kaddish, the Hebrew prayer for the dead that he'd recited so often after his mother's death, but his heart was thumping so fast that he couldn't think. Icy prickles of terror ran up and down the skin of his arms. A little girl tugged at the skirt of the woman next to Jacob. "Why is she all wet, Mama?" "I don't know. Maybe the water line broke and flooded the bottom floors." "But where's Timothy? Didn't he live with his granny?" the child asked. "Is Timothy all right?" "I don't know, child. I haven't seen Timothy, but he might have gotten out earlier. Don't keep pestering me with so many questions right now. They've been carrying folks out of there all morning, and it looks like anybody left in there has been drowned." Fear washed over Jacob. What about Papa and Sophie? Please, God, don't let them be drowned. He backed away from the cluster of people and stumbled into the street, and the dog following at his heels. Jacob's stomach was queasy and his arms and legs felt shaky. He flopped onto the ground and closed his eyes. The dog nosed Jacob's neck. When Jacob didn't move, the dog whined and licked the boy's nose with his sticky tongue. Jacob sat up and opened his eyes, grimacing at the sour odor of the dog's breath. He stroked the animal's ears while he peered around the street. Lots of people were standing in little clumps on the street, but he didn't see anybody he knew. "I guess most of our neighbors have already left," he thought. Where did everybody go? Leather shoes were scattered along the street near where he sat. Jacob reached for one. Its heel was missing. This must be from Mr. Strasburg's shop. Jacob wondered if the old cobbler, who lived in a room behind his shop, had made it out in time. Picking himself up, Jacob brushed off the seat of his pants. He took a deep breath and walked over to a man leaning on a wheelbarrow full of clothing. "Pardon me," he said. "My name's Jacob Kaufman. We live in that house next door to the Nevada. Have you seen my father, Itzhak Kaufman, the butcher? He's got dark hair. He'd have my sister with him. She's only 5, with dark curly hair." The man shook his head. Jacob thanked him and went from person to person, asking the same questions. They all tried to be helpful, but nobody knew Itzhak Kaufman. Nobody remembered seeing a man and a girl that matched their description. "Sorry, son," a tall woman told him. She had tears in her eyes. "I can't find my father either. He's so crippled up with the rheumatiz that he can hardly walk. I've been searching for him all morning." "A lot of families got separated," another woman muttered. "Try not to worry, kid. You'll find him." Finally, a freckled woman with a kerchief tied around her hair smiled at Jacob. "I think I know who you're talking about," she said. "Your father's the butcher, isn't he?" "Yes," Jacob said. He held his breath. "I used to buy meat from him," she continued. "His wife died not too long ago, right?" Jacob nodded. "Have you seen him?" "I saw someone who looked like him on the street this morning, maybe an hour or two ago. He was carrying a little girl. She had her thumb in her mouth." "That's her," Jacob said. "That's Sophie." "They're alive, both of them." Jacob felt like flying. "Do you know where they went?" The woman shook her head. "No, can't say I do, but maybe someone else saw them." She turned and called to a red-haired man in a cape. "Eddie, you remember the butcher, Mr. Kaufman? He lived in the same building as Fritz. Have you seen him? This is his son." The man nodded at Jacob. "Kaufman, the butcher? Yes, I know your da. Saw him this morning, I did, right after the big shake." He looked around the street. "But that was a couple of hours ago. I don't know where he is now. Maybe you got an aunt or a granny living down here." "No, my uncle." Suddenly a thought flashed through Jacob's mind. "I know where they went. Papa thinks I'm at Uncle Abe's stand. He must have gone there to look for me," Jacob exclaimed. He shook the man's hand up and down. "Thank you, mister. Thank you." Tears slid down Jacob's cheeks. He wiped them with his sleeves and stammered. "See, I was afraid that—" "Of course you were." The man patted Jacob's shoulder. "I understand," he said. "It's only natural. You're afraid your da got crushed when the building fell. That's how any man would feel." Swallowing hard, Jacob tried to steady his voice. "Well, I'll be seeing you," he said. "Good luck, and thanks again for your help." Jacob took off at a trot, heading back towards Market Street. The dog bounded along beside him.